are direct democracy powers. And the initiative is one of them, as you know. And the initiative allows voters to write laws without the legislature. The legislature doesn't care for that. And neither do the boards of supervisors, and neither do the city councils, and neither do any of the people in government. They don't care for the fact that voters can write laws without them. Well, in San Bernardino County, the voters were a little annoyed with the supervisors, and they decided they would limit their terms to 1, and they would cut their salary to the median income in the county. Wow. They didn't like that. This was Measure K. This was Measure K a couple of years ago, and Measure K passed with 66.8% of the vote.
Wow.
And the supervisors have been coming at them ever since. They came at them in the courts. They came at them in the legislature. A bill was passed to prevent this from ever happening again, but they were forced by lobbying by the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association and others to put in a carve-out so that Measure K would survive. It's still being litigated in the courts. I think it's on appeal. The taxpayers won the last round, if I'm not mistaken. But now, the supervisors have put something on the ballot to reverse it. And they're calling it Measure D, and they're claiming that this is a taxpayer protection. In fact, am I right? Did you get this mailer? They are claiming that this is the greatest thing since Ronald Reagan and Howard Jarvis had lunch together.
Sliced bread.
And sliced bread, yes. They sent out a mailer that had a picture of Reagan and a picture of the Time magazine cover, the famous Time magazine cover of Howard Jarvis with his fist in the air and the stars around his head. Right, and it said, it's Prop 13, it's the new Prop 13 for San Bernardino County. Well, they made 2 mistakes. The first mistake they made was lying to the voters. And the second mistake they made was using a copyrighted photograph of Howard Jarvis on the cover of Time magazine. So the letters started to go out from everybody who has permission to use the photograph or the cover, and I think there are at last count 3 lawsuits about it, 3 cease and desists and lawsuits pending for damages over using that, because this is no kind of a taxpayer protection. This is how deceitful these politicians can be. They're claiming that this is giving voters the right to vote on taxes. You already have the right to vote on taxes. They're claiming that this is going to require a 4/5 vote of the supervisors to put a tax increase on the ballot. You already have the right to have the supervisors required to hold a 2/3 vote. To put it, guess what? 2/3 and 4 out of 5, that's the same number. So they're telling you that this is protecting taxpayers. It's a complete and total lie. What does it actually do? It puts back the salary, and it puts back the extra term. So they say, well, this limits the term of the supervisor. Well, yeah, it limits it to 2, but it's currently 1. And this controls the salary. Yes, certainly it does. It raises it. That's how it controls the salary. This is how deceitful the politicians are. And this is how we got the initiative power in the first place, because people were so sick of this kind of nonsense. So we have the referendum, the recall, and the initiative power. Very, very important. And I also want to talk about what Ginny mentioned, which is Dr. Robert Epstein. Do I have the name right? Dr. Robert Epstein. He is someone who discovered in the 2016 election, right?
Initially, yeah.
Initially in the 2016 election, that Google was messing with us. And what Google was doing is when you start to type something in and the search suggestions come up so that you don't have to type the whole thing, they were manipulating really favorable stories for Hillary Clinton and Nazi references for Donald Trump.
And one of about 12 different ways they manipulate us.
Okay, so there's like 12, there's the search rankings, the search terms, the ephemeral things that come up and then they're gone again after you finish typing. They were manipulating people who were searching for election information. They're also worried now about the Russians manipulating it, right? Or about the right-wing extremists manipulating it. They did this themselves. And one of the ways they manipulated the electronic information is by screening the emails. There is a lawsuit currently. Am I right about this? It's the RNC, I believe. They are suing because Google started sending the Republican fundraising emails to spam on Gmail. Not the Democrats, just the Republicans.
And the phone calls.
Oh, the phone calls also? Okay. So they were intentionally discriminating against the Republican Party, and there's a lawsuit now about it. I don't know how long it's going to take or how it's going to turn out, because, as you know, the election will be over, the damage is done. What's the disincentive to this kind of conduct? Well, with the Howard Jarvis theft, the disincentive is that HJTA came down like a ton of bricks on this campaign and started, we sent out a press release and interviews, and John Kupal wrote a column about it, and it's all about, this is not a taxpayer protection, this is deceiving the voters, this is the most deceptive campaign John Kupal said that he has ever seen. And we've seen a few, so the most deceptive campaign ever. And that's really the disincentive. To know that, yes, you're gonna pull this stuff, but then we're gonna come down on you like a ton of bricks and tell the voters, and it isn't gonna work. So be prepared to have a lot more money in the bank to answer the charges, because the charges are gonna come from us. So that's what you have to do as voters. You have to get when you get these deceptive mailers, when you get these slate mailers that say the Republican Revolution and 3 Democrats are on it, with the asterisk that they paid for, tell your friends, tell them by email, tell them on social media, tell them that those things are just advertising. And the candidates who are on them are not necessarily bad, but it's advertising. It's not the official recommendation of Ronald Reagan personally. There's no elephant signing on. There's no elephant signing on to these campaigns. Sometimes they get sued for using the elephant. In fact, the particular Republican trademark is the elephant with 3 stars on it, the drawing of the elephant with 3 stars. That's trademarked or copyrighted. It's protected in some way by law. And people who use it get a really nasty letter from the Republican Party. Harmeet Dillon used to do this all day long, just sending letters to these people who send out flyers with the elephant who are not the Republican Party. So then you started seeing photographs of zoo elephants. And now sometimes you just see Republican. Well, you can't trademark that. So, I mean, they can lie to you. That's politics. That's First Amendment. Tell your friends. Tell your relatives. Tell everybody. Those slate mailers are just advertising. Just advertising. So watch out for the propositions this year. Now, Proposition 1 is particularly bad and particularly interesting. And speaking of deceptive, that one is. Current California law, as you probably all know, abortion is legal up to the point of viability as determined by a physician, and after viability only to protect the life and health of the mother as determined by a physician. That's current law. Nothing the Supreme Court did in the Dobbs case affects that at all. Because what the Supreme Court said was, this is up to the states. And California had already made its decision. But pollsters determined that a lot of voters who are independents, and female Democrats in particular, who would not normally bother to vote in a midterm election, would become tremendously agitated and would definitely vote if they were persuaded that abortion rights were threatened and their vote would save them. So the Democrats concocted a constitutional amendment, and they're trying to say that that's what's happening. But it's a complete lie. And they did it so fast that they ignored really good legal advice from the left, from Berkeley Law. They ignored legal advice that said the way you've worded this is going to come back to bite you in the courts. So don't do this, make changes. But they were in such a hurry. They didn't want to introduce it. This is how interesting this issue is politically. They were afraid to introduce it before the June primary. Now, supposedly the polls are everybody loves abortion in California, right? That's what the polls show. Apparently not, because they did not want to introduce this until after the June primary polls had closed. The 8th, the 9th, I forget the exact date that they introduced it. Every Democrat signs on as a co-sponsor in both houses. The leadership writes it, everybody signs on. They hurry it to the ballot, they have to get it all the way through everything, and it doesn't have to be signed by the governor because it's a constitutional amendment proposal, but they get everything done by like the 30th of June before they recess. Because They had to meet the ballot deadline to get it on the November ballot. What's the big rush? It's all about the November ballot. It's all about the turnout in November. It's all about getting these independents, they think, to come out for this issue for the congressional races. Because that's really what's at stake. The congressional races, some of them are going to be close, and they're very important for the Democrats to hold or the Republicans to take the majority. And you never really know. So every vote matters and every race counts, because you can't tell. So they rush it to the ballot, and here's what it does. It's a constitutional amendment to the California Constitution that creates a fundamental constitutional right to choose to have an abortion, period. It conflicts with state laws that talk about viability and the life and health of the mother. A constitutional amendment overrides laws that conflict with it. So what this amendment will do is legalize abortion all the way up to the moment of birth. Now they deny this, but I know it's true, and I'll tell you how I know it's true. I had the opportunity as a member of the editorial board to talk to Planned Parenthood, the people who put this, they actually wrote it, Planned Parenthood wrote it. And they put it on the ballot, and they came to our editorial board for a meeting to talk about how great it was and would we endorse it. So it was during the period when the ballot arguments that are in that voter information guide, you know, that newsprint book that's this thick that has all the ballot information about the one you don't want to bother to read, which is why you're here for the short version. In that book, there are arguments against Prop 1, but before they're printed by the Secretary of State, they're up for public examination for about 3 weeks. And it was during that period when they could still be challenged, and you could go to court and you could say, this is misleading, this is untrue, this should come out, and a judge could order changes. So I showed it to them, and I had red boxes around every time that the opponents of Prop 1 said, this will legalize abortion all the way up to the moment of birth, even if the baby is healthy, even if the mother is healthy, no questions asked. I showed them, it's like 7 times, in the rebuttal argument and in the main argument against. I showed them with red circles. I said, now, you say that this is misleading and this is false. Who's going to court to get these statements taken out of the ballot book? Silence. Silence. And finally, one of them said, well, we still have time to look at that. And nobody went to court. Nobody went to court to get those supposedly false statements taken out of the ballot book. Nobody. Not the Attorney General. I asked him also in a separate meeting. I said, they're saying that this legalizes abortion all the way up to the moment of birth. Is that false? Oh yeah, that's false. Are you going to court to get that taken out? There's still time for that. Well, the deadline came and the deadline went. And let me give you a list of people who could have gone to court and didn't. Tony Atkins in the Senate. Anthony Rendon could have gone. The governor could have gone. The Attorney General could have gone. Any of the Democratic caucus could have gone to a judge and said, this is false and we want this taken out. Planned Parenthood could have gone. All the proponents, any citizen in California, could have gone to court and said, these are false statements and it's going to mislead the voters, take this out. And not one person did. And the reason is, it's true. It's all true. Tell your friends. Tell your friends, especially your friends who are pro-choice. Tell your friends.
Can't they go ahead and murder the baby up to 28 days after it's born, legally?
That's a separate bill. Yes, it's true. And what it says is that, it doesn't say you can murder the baby. It says that there can't be an
You
investigation.
can call it something else.
Well, what it says is there can't be an investigation.
Yeah.
So if you see that happen, you can't call the police because they won't investigate
And the
it.
coroner won't do anything about it.
Yeah. So this is quite something.
Is there any polling on it?
You know, I'm not sure. What time is it? At 9 p.m. there's a PPIC poll that is going to be released. You can check ppic.org and you can look and see. There was an embargoed press release that went out, and I only glanced at it and I can't tell you what it said, but it didn't ask anything about whether you were voting for or against it as far as the press release was. So I don't know. At 9 o'clock we can check if there's any polling on it. But I can tell you this, supposedly this is going to pass overwhelmingly, that's what they all say. And yet, Just this week, $100,000 went from SEIU into the Yes on One committee.
Wow.
So somebody's calling and asking the unions to donate money. Somebody called one of the Indian tribes and asked them to donate money. A lot of money, like $300,000 I think it was in that case. A lot of money. And Gavin Newsom is raising money, and some of the assembly members are writing checks from their own re-election accounts to the Yes on. Why do they need so much money if this is such a slam dunk in California? So this is a really interesting issue. I don't think California is quite as pro-choice as they think it is. I think a lot of people in California are much more conservative or nuanced on this issue than Prop 1 would figure. And it's going to be quite a news story, whatever happens with this. If it doesn't pass, of course, that's a huge news story. And if it does pass, and this starts to happen, even one legal fight over late-term abortion. In fact, even if the abortion doesn't happen, but the legal fight happens, the consequences could be wildly unpredictable. I mean, you could have a really conservative Supreme Court decision come out of this situation that no one is foreseeing. Talk about unintended consequences. There could be like an emergency appeal that a father could bring in federal court. A father would have standing to stop something from happening. And they could go to federal court, and they could go all the way to the Supreme Court in 15 minutes on an emergency basis. And perhaps, as a result of California doing this, abortion will be illegal in America because they'll decide that a fetus has the right to life under the 14th Amendment. That could happen. I mean, it's never happened before, but we've never done this before. So that's a really interesting one to watch. Tell your friends that what is in their ballot booklet in the no on one argument is completely true and nobody challenged it in court. Tell them that. Because I'm sure you have friends and relatives who think they're pro-choice. They should know what this does. Yes?
Quickly, someone said about 28 days after when baby is born. I know in New York, they have 31 days, and that failed, the building up fast. The 28 days is part of this Prop 1?
It's not part of, it's a separate law and the governor signed it.
And what's that prop? What's it,
I don't remember the number. Did you remember the number of it?
2223.
2223?
Yeah.
what is it?
Yes.
Yeah, AB 2223.
I know you have a lot of questions for Susan.
We have to get through the rest of the ballot.
But what I really would like her to do is to finish, us to give her an opportunity to finish what she has begun, and then we will have a Q&A session until the
Okay.
end of the evening.
Okay.
Let her-
And the first question is, if you need a white Altima moved because it's blocking your car, it's mine, so just let me know. Got here later, sorry. Okay, so let's go through the rest of the ballot. That's Prop 1. That's one of the most interesting and nationally important things happening for all the reasons we just discussed.
Vote no on that one.
Vote no on Prop 1. We jumped from Prop 1 to Prop 26. The legislature was so anxious for people to be excited about Prop 1 that they passed a special bill to name it 1. So they did that, so that's why it's 1. But we're actually starting at 26 this year. So Prop 26 and 27 are the sports betting initiatives. And interestingly, it's a very small percentage of people in California who tell pollsters that they are personally interested in sports betting. It's less than 10% of Californians who really care about it. So it looks like these are going to go down. And let me tell you what they are, just so you know which is which. 26 would allow in-person sports betting only at tribal casinos. And no online betting, and no other companies getting into the action at all. Exclusive at the tribal casinos in person. And the tribal casinos hate the competition from the card rooms. They hate the fact that you can play blackjack and whatever else at the Commerce Casino or any of these card rooms in California. So they stuck something in Prop 26, as long as they were going to the trouble, that allows private lawyers to sue the card rooms to enforce gaming regulations. So this is like the Private Attorney General Act. You know those Prop 65 warning cards that you see on bakeries? You know, it's like baked goods might contain something that causes cancer. It's ludicrous. But if you don't have it up there, a lawyer can walk by and sue you. Well, that would happen to the card rooms with gaming regulations under Prop 26. It's one of the most anti-competitive, nasty, vindictive things. But they are trying to make the whole business exclusive to them in person at their facilities, and then, just for fun, throw a dart at their competition. So that's 26. 27 is also kind of anti-competitive. This comes to us from the big gaming platforms, DraftKings, FanDuel, and what this would do is cut everybody else out of it and let just these companies offer sports betting. And the way they do it is they require a $100 million fee for the license to offer sports betting in front.
Wow.
$100 million, and that's not all. Heaven forbid that someone like Elon Musk should come along and try to disrupt their business. I've got $100 million, here you go. In case that should happen, you can't do it unless you have casino licenses in 10 other states. And even if you have casino licenses in 10 other states and you have $100 million for the license, you have to have a deal with one of the tribal casinos, because unless you have a contract with one of them that has a gaming license in California, you can't offer sports betting. So these companies would be the only ones that could offer it, take it or leave it. It would allow online betting on all sporting events, mobile devices, laptop computers, all of that. And one of the really unusual things in this measure is they're sensitive to the argument, well, what about organized crime? What about problem gambling? So this is their solution for that. You ready? Surveillance of everybody's sports bets, reported to the Attorney General so they can watch for problems.
Oh, yeah.
I'm thinking not. I'm thinking if you want to bet on the Dodgers, it's your business. And if you want to bet on the Dodgers on an offshore platform, it's your business. And this would essentially set up this whole new regime of surveillance, reporting, enforcement, regulation. The worst thing you can be in California is a legal business. It's just like being a criminal. Except when you're a criminal, they want to rehabilitate you and do things for you. And if you're a legal business, so that's 27. I'm voting no on both of them. Whatever you want to do, that's what they are. There was a third one that was attempting to get on the 2024 ballot. It didn't make it. So that was coming from one of the other Indian groups, and that would have allowed online sports betting only if you go to their casino and register in person. But that didn't make it. Now, just so you know, the legislature can legalize sports betting. They can legalize it. The Supreme Court said every state can legalize it. Many states have. California has not. Why? Because everybody's fighting over the turf. They all want it exclusively. And they're all making deals. Well, we'll cut you in over here. 26 would cut in 4 racetracks and allow sports betting at 4 racetracks. Just those, and nowhere else. Why? Because they're just making deals. They're making deals to get enough money to do the campaign to pass it. But it looks like the voters are saying no to both of them. And there has been a really nasty campaign of no on, probably seen all these ads. I think there's been $400 million of ad spending so far in these 2 campaigns. So that's 26 and 27. I'm voting no on both of them. 28 is funding for music and arts education. Now, how many of you have ever seen a ballot measure sold to the voters with, this is a tax increase, and if you don't pass it, we're going to cut arts and music in the schools? It's like every time. Every time. Vote for this tax increase or the art teacher gets it. So if you're tired of that and you think arts and music education should be funded, then you're in the same boat with the proponents of Prop 28. It comes to us from Austin Butner, who was the superintendent of LAUSD. And it's sponsored financially by one of the guitar companies, Fender, I think, which provided guitars to kids during the pandemic and got a relationship going with the district. So this is $1 billion from the general fund. Roughly, it's a formula, but it's about $1 billion every year from the general fund on top of all the regular funding for education that happens under Prop 98. It is not a tax increase. What it's doing is it's telling the legislature, you are directed to make this a budget priority. $1 billion goes to dedicated arts and music education in every public school, every K-12 school in California, charter schools, district schools. I think it's good. I think it is. Some people don't like ballot box budgeting. Some people are worried that if you direct $1 billion into this, they'll come to us for a tax increase for something else. But that tax increase will be for something less popular. Yeah. So they won't be able to say to you, vote for this or we're going to cut arts and music. That game will be over. And they can do another game, but that one will be over. So I'm voting yes on 28. I think it's harmless and probably beneficial. And a lot of kids in public school who are exposed to art and music and career opportunities like CGI, video games, special effects, computer work, that all falls under this. I think a lot of kids will really benefit from that, and they wouldn't otherwise be exposed to it. And that's good. That's what the public schools should be doing, not just indoctrinating everybody in woke nonsense. So that's 28.
Can I say something to you? Senator Hertzberg appeared at the Valley Alliance of Neighborhood Councils, and he said specifically, if a proposition does not say that under penalty of prosecution, they cannot repurpose these funds for any reason without a 2/3 vote of the voters, don't vote for it. Because the way the propositions are set up, they may say your money is going here, your money is going there, but there is no guarantee they can take and redirect that money anytime they want. So when you go to the polls and you look at propositions, and it doesn't say anything about not being able to transfer those funds at will, don't vote for it. That's my opinion.
Well, I'm not sure that Senator Hertzberg is telling you the
Ever heard
complete
the lottery?
truth about that,
Remember the
but
lottery for schools? The lottery
that's
is all
right, the
for
lottery for
the
the
schools?
schools. Well, this money is said to be dedicated, and you can read the fine print yourself. It's in your ballot booklet. You can read the exact text of it. And certainly, everybody's going to be accountable if they route that money into something else, because the voters have said this. Okay, so that's 28. 29 is once again, for the third time on our stage, the kidney dialysis regulation measure. Ta-da! Because you voted it down once, because you voted it down twice. They think you didn't know what you were talking about. Here it is again. Now, what is this? This is a union that is irritated with the kidney dialysis clinic operators for not being unionized. And they have just vowed to make them spend money on this no on whatever number it is campaign every 2 years, forever. And the union goes out and they collect the signatures and they put it on the ballot. It's the same measure for the third time. There is no reason for it. There was no reason for it the first time. There was no reason for it the second time. And there's no reason for it now. It is strictly a union bothering people. And so no on 29. There's just, and we're all so tired of seeing those commercials.
Yeah.
No on 29. Proposition 30 is California at its most California-ist. Proposition 30 is a tax increase on the wealthy to fund electric vehicle subsidies and charging infrastructure, and just enough wildfire fighting so it can be in the commercials that you're fighting wildfires, because they don't think that electric vehicle subsidies will get your yes vote. Now, here's what's wrong with this one. First of all, a very small percentage of California tax filers pay something like 2/3 of all the personal income tax revenue in the general fund. Something like 0.5% of taxpayers in California pay 2/3 of the personal income tax revenue, because we have a very high top rate, 13.3%. And we also tax capital gains as regular income, 13.3% top rate. That's a lot, because it's federal tax too, and so it's 13.3 just California on income. It's very high. And if people want lower state taxes and they want to move to another state, they have 49 other choices that have lower taxes than California. If they leave, it leaves less money in the budget. There's less revenue for schools. There's less revenue for healthcare. There's less revenue for everything if they leave. So the question is, what's the point at which they will leave? Now, a lot of people think we're past it. People like Elon Musk have moved to Texas. We're already hearing stories that the football teams in California have trouble recruiting because people don't want to pay the California income tax, so they'd rather play somewhere else, like Florida, where there's a 0 income tax rate, or Texas, where there's a 0 income tax rate. So the idea of raising taxes on this same cohort of people, in this case people who make $2 million a year or more, is a sketchy public policy idea. And for what it's worth, the legislature didn't do this. The legislature is sketchy enough, and it was too sketchy for them. So why is this on your ballot? Who decided we should raise taxes? Well, here's how this happened. Governor Newsom said we're making a transition to green energy and we have to have zero emission cars. And the California Air Resources Board said, yes, sir, we'll write regulations that make that happen. And one of the first ones they wrote affected the rideshare companies. And they said the rideshare companies must have 90% of the miles they drive zero emission by 2030. 90% of the miles they drive, zero emission. And nobody wanted to pay for the cars. The legislature didn't want to pay for the cars. The drivers can't pay for the cars. Lyft doesn't want to pay for the cars. Uber doesn't want to pay for the cars. The California Air Resources Board, it's not their problem. They're not going to pay for the cars. So Lyft spent $15 million to collect signatures to put this tax increase on the ballot for electric vehicle subsidies, charging infrastructure, and just enough wildfire fighting for the commercials. And that's how this got on the ballot. Vote no. Now let me tell you who's against this. The Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association is against it because it's a tax increase. The business community is against it because it's a tax increase. The wealthy people in Silicon Valley are funding the campaign against it because it's a tax increase on them. The teachers union, the CTA, California Teachers Association, is against it. Why? Because they don't get the money. And probably if you look at their drawing board, they've got plans to tax these same people in 2 years for something they want to do. So they're against it. And then the governor's against it. Why is the governor against it? Because he works for the teachers union. Now who's for it? The Democratic Party is for it. Why is the Democratic Party for it? Lyft has donated like $6 million to the California Democratic Party. And coincidentally, the Democratic Party took a position in favor of Lyft's measure. This is nonsense. This is so California. No one wants this nonsense. But we have this stupid mandate. All these environmental mandates, somewhere in the fine print it says it must be feasible and cost effective. What does feasible and cost effective mean? It means nothing. It's whatever they want to do. They just order it. And then the regulators believe that if they order it, California is such a big market that businesses will figure something out. They'll figure out something, they'll invent something, they'll do something to make it happen. And if you don't force the market won't cooperate. Well, what this ends up doing is costing you a lot of money. A lot of money. Because if the car companies are making cars to meet these California quotas, but nobody's buying them, because if you buy an electric car, your biggest expense is the other car you have to have. So when you really need to go somewhere, you can... And the house with the two-car garage. This runs into money to buy an electric car. So this is the problem. The cars are not ready. The people are not buying them. So the companies have to make electric cars, or they have to buy credits from a company like Tesla that makes electric cars. I think at one point Tesla was making more money from selling the credits than the Teslas. Maybe they still are. So that's what's going on. And every time you buy a car, some of that is in the price of the car. So when you see stories about how much the price of a car has increased, this is why. This is why. And California has made gasoline so much more expensive. And now, they think they're going to have a windfall profits tax on the oil companies. Oh, really? They've had about 7 separate investigations looking into the so-called excess profits. You know what they find every time? The oil companies are doing nothing wrong. It's these California regulations with their special blend, winter blend, and their summer blend, and their exclusive blend. You can't bring gasoline from over state lines into California and sell it. So if a refinery goes down for maintenance, or for repairs, or something unexpected happens, boom, we have a shortage and the price goes up. So this is just more idiocy. So that's all Prop 30. No on Prop 30. Prop 31 is another one of our direct democracy powers. We're exercising all of them this year. The referendum. The referendum means that the legislature passed something, the governor signed it, and we don't want it. So somebody collected signatures to put a referendum on the ballot to see if the voters want this law. This particular law is a ban on flavored tobacco products. It's a ban on the sale of flavored tobacco products. The thinking in Sacramento is, that banning this will prevent children from getting these products. It's already illegal to sell or give these products to children. They're going to be legal in all the other states, most likely. So there will probably be a black market for the adults who want to buy it. So what you're doing is you're giving, with this ban, you're giving up about $100 million a year in tax revenue from the sale of the products, and you're probably funding cartels that are going to bring it in from elsewhere and sell it as a drug. Now, meanwhile, Sacramento's legalizing everything else. They almost legalized LSD this year, and they almost legalized mushrooms, and they're going to ban menthol. And they're going to create this class of crimes for people who sell products with menthol. And then they're going to have criminal justice issues of, well, why are you arresting people for selling what's legal in Nevada? And then they're going to want to do mass pardons again. And why are we doing this? To me, the law is really stupid. So, for everyone who thinks the law is stupid, when you vote on a referendum, you are voting on the law itself. You essentially stand in the shoes of the legislature when you vote on a referendum. So here's the law. Vote yes if you want it. Vote no if you don't want it. So I'm voting no on Prop 31. That's how a referendum works. It's as if you have been elected to the assembly and you're sitting in the chair with the electric voting switch and the law comes up for a vote. Do you want this law? Do you not want this law? The law is the ban on the sale of flavored tobacco products. Vote yes or no. So that's your ballot. A couple of things that are on the county ballot, and does anyone here live in the city of Los Angeles? You live in the city of Los Angeles. The city of Los Angeles. Do you vote? Do you vote for the mayor's race? Do you vote for the city in the city of Los Angeles? Okay. I have some yard signs in my car for you. This is. We have several things on the Los Angeles ballot that are tax increases. Measure ULA is a giant tax on real estate transfers over $5 million. And that's a 4% extra tax on the price of real estate. Yep. And it's going to, they're selling it, this is coming to us from activists, they're selling it as a tiny tax on big mansions. Actually, it's a big tax on commercial property. Yeah. It's a tax on the sale of office buildings and movie theaters and supermarkets and apartment buildings. Apartment buildings would be taxed extra 4% if it's worth more than $10 million, extra 5.5%. And where does the money go? The money goes into a brand new bureaucracy for homelessness. Oh. So I see you already know about that. Yes. So yeah, that's Measure ULA, vote no on ULA. And the other one is Proposition SP. And this one, even the LA Times isn't for it. This is a tax increase supposedly for parks, but actually it's a backdoor tax for the Olympics and the LA River Project. Yes. And it will cost you $84.14 per 1,000 square feet of your home or business. $84 and change per 1,000 square feet every year for 30 years. And then it drops down a little and becomes permanent. So, 30-year tax so they can have a big Olympics party and build cool venues and stuff. Yeah, no on Proposition SP. I have yard signs in the trunk of the car, which is blocking 2 people. So. Okay, also, Measure LH on the LA City ballot is an authorization to build public housing in every council district in the city. We currently have in the Constitution a requirement that voters must approve low-income housing of that type. When it's built in the jurisdiction, voters have to approve it. This is the approval. If the voters say yes on Measure LH, you're going to see these homeless housing apartment buildings, these low-income housing apartment buildings in all 15 council districts everywhere. It's not the approval for each. This is not an approval for each individual project, but this is the opportunity to stop them all. It probably is going to pass because it looks like it's good, but it isn't. LH. So I'm a no on LH. On your county ballot, you have a bond measure for the Los Angeles Community College District. No on that. They want another $5.3 billion for buildings. They had $9-point-something billion just 6 years ago, and they haven't even spent it all. And this is another $5 billion of authorization for bonds for buildings. And guess what it says on the ballot? It's to take the asbestos and the lead paint out of the walls. Again? $9 billion 6 years ago. If there's still asbestos in the walls, who's going to prison for this?
Thank you.
Honestly. So no on that. That's Measure LA. That's the Community College District, which is countywide, I believe. And the other one that's countywide is Measure A. This is the, let the Board of Supervisors fire the sheriff measure. See, no on A. No on Measure A. The Board of Supervisors doesn't walk on water, and the sheriff is an independently elected official, and this is a change to the county charter that might not even be constitutional under the state constitution. So, no on A, because if you want to get rid of the sheriff, the recall process is our other direct democracy thing since 1911. We can fire the sheriff right in the middle of his term if we're unhappy. Let me tell you a little bit about the Gascon recall and what's going on now.
Yeah.
Give you an update on that. So the Gascon recall got 520,000 valid signatures according to the registrar's office. It got 790,000, I think was the raw number. And they said 520,000 were valid. But actually, more than that were valid. And this is a very interesting situation. LA County has 5.6 million registered voters, and the signature requirement is 10% of the registered voters for a county recall. Now, if the voter roll is bloated with people who have died or moved or duplicate names, you still have to get 10% of those too. If you could get a judge to look at the evidence that there is bloat on the voter rolls, you could possibly get that number reduced. And the other thing that is happening is in ruling that some of these signatures were invalid, the people who are the proponents of the recall have been looking at the rejected signatures. And so far they've looked at 2% of them, and 39% of the signatures that were ruled invalid are valid in their sample. So the combination of that and possibly challenging the size of the requirement could get the thing possibly qualified. And there's no time deadline because whenever a recall qualifies, there has to be a special election. Sometimes if it's close to a regular election, it'll be consolidated with the regular election to save money, but that doesn't have to happen. They can have a special election whenever they qualify. So the latest news is that a court has, they were complaining, the proponents have the right to see every rejected signature. But LA County has these screens, you have to look at everything on screens, and you need the technical staff to set this up, and it's very time consuming, and they would only let them be in there 3 days a week, and they had a limited number of staff people. This is not like a recount where the proponents have to pay for it. This is their right under state law to look at every rejected signature. So they went to court to say that the county is not giving them the resources and not giving them enough time and not letting them see everything they need to see. They want more stations, they want to be there more days per week. And the judge set a hearing date for December 6th, I think, to rule on this motion that they have to have more resources to do this in a timely way. So that's interesting. That is not over, the Gascon recall. They actually did get 520,000 verified authentic signatures. They needed 566,000, so they're 46,000 signatures short. And out of the 200,000 that were disqualified, probably a good number of them are actually valid. And the more interesting part for all the rest of the elections is getting into those processes and seeing where the registrar is screwing us on the other stuff. Because, as one example, they threw out something like 7,400 signatures for registrations that were supposedly canceled. Canceled. That means that the voter was registered. I asked them what that meant, and it meant that the voter was registered at one time, but the county canceled the registration. I asked the Secretary of State, Shirley Weber, I had the opportunity because of the editorial board meetings to ask her, why would registrations in Los Angeles County of people who were there signing the petition, why would those registrations be canceled? This is what she said. They should never be canceled. We only make them inactive. We never cancel registrations in California. I said, is that the same for every county? She said, absolutely. So that's suspicious. That's 7,400 people who are probably valid signatures. And then there were duplicate signatures where the clerks made a mistake because they brought in like 400 to 500 temp workers to sit at these screens and try to find these voters. They had to look at the signature on the petition, which was on a screen, and then they had to type in the name or the name and address or just the address to search the voter roll. and they had 800,000 signatures and 30 days, and you know they were going like this, you know, hurry up, like Lucy and Ethel in the candy factory. And so one of the things that they made mistakes with is when they would find a duplicate signature, they invalidated both signatures as duplicates. Oh, no, you can't do that. So I think there were 14,000 that were ruled duplicates, so 7,000 are probably accurate and valid there. So this is what the proponents of the Gascon recall are going to be doing for the next several months. And it's entirely possible that, like, let's say February, that qualified. Hang in there.